Hello everyone and welcome to Techstrong TV. Today is Monday, August 22nd, and I hope you're having a wonderful day so far. I'm William Willis and I'm going to be your host for the day. And today's show will bring you some great content with incredible guests from around the world, so stay tuned. As always, I'll start out with our Techstrong news recap, filling you in on the biggest tech headlines from around the world. Then, Alan sits down with Ray Canzanese, Director of Threat Research at Netskope Threat Labs. Alan and Ray will talk about Netskope's latest cyber threat report, a report analyzing the latest cloud threats affecting enterprises. Next, Alan speaks with Jen Miller Osborne, Deputy Director of Threat Intelligence of Unit 42 at Palo Alto Networks. In this interview, the two will talk about Palo Alto Networks' recently published 2022 Unit 42 response report, which includes information on the most popular methods hackers use for attacks. We're then joined by our very own Cody J. Brown, who will hop on to tell us more about some of the upcoming webinars that we have. Then, in case you missed the premiere on Monday, we are re-airing the first episode of the new series Engineering the Change. This series follows 3 winners of the Engineering the Change Scholarship Program as they tackle a 10-week intensive coding bootcamp and prepare themselves for a career in software engineering. We then go to KubeCon Cloud Native Con, where Mitch met with Steve Jagar, developer advocate at Bridgecrew. In this interview, Mitch and Steve discussed vulnerability scanning in the cloud and talked about supply chain integrity. Next, we have 2 episodes of View with Vizard. In the first interview, Mike interviews Steve Wilson, Chief Product Officer for Contrast Security, where Steve will explain what it really takes to cope with zero-day vulnerabilities. Then, Mike interviews Jeff Martin, Vice President of Product for Ment, where Jeff will explain why the amount of application security debt piling up is going to end badly. We then go back to KubeCon Cloud Native Con, where Alan spoke with Aaron Reinhardt, co-founder and CTO at Verica, and Tony De La Fuente, founder of Prowler. The 3 discussed vulnerability scanning, continuous monitoring, and continuous verification. Finally, we go to RSA, where Alan met up with Brian Reed, Chief Mobility Officer at NowSecure, where they discussed NowSecure's mobile application security services, which offers a full suite of security testing tools and training. And that's what we have coming for you for this episode of Techstrong TV. So let's get the show started. Enjoy.
SecurityBoulevard.com is the leading resource for news, analysis, and education on challenges facing the cybersecurity industry. SecurityBoulevard.com covers all aspects of cybersecurity, including data security, DevSecOps, cloud security, application security, network security, security threats, and more. SecurityBoulevard.com has the largest selection of security content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.securityboulevard.com to learn more. SecurityBoulevard.com, home of Security Bloggers Network.
Hi again, everyone. Here are the headlines for August 22nd. First up, Apple has disclosed serious security vulnerabilities for its iPhones, iPads, and Macs that could allow attackers to take complete control of these devices. Apple has explained that the vulnerability could allow a hacker to get full admin access to impersonate the device's owner, meaning that they could run any software in their name. Some of the devices that could be affected by this vulnerability are iPhone 6s and later models, several models of the iPad, as well as all iPad Pro models, and Macs running macOS Monterey. Apple advises that you update all of your devices that are susceptible to this vulnerability. Next up, for the first month ever, the time viewers spent watching streaming services outpaced broadcast and cable television for July. Viewers spent 35% of their time with streaming services such as Netflix and Hulu, compared to the 34% on cable network and 22% on broadcast television. Streaming audiences share also went up 23% compared to the July of the previous year. Both broadcast television and cable are down in this metric. July is the month where broadcast television has little live sports or scripted programming, so upcoming football games and newly scripted content should boost broadcast television. But the television business is changing, and this is just one sign of it. In other news, Cisco Systems Inc. gave it a positive forecast for the first quarter sales, sending the company's shares 5% higher in trading. Cisco stated that COVID-19 recovery in China will ease supply chain shortages to help it meet its demand. Cisco expects current quarter revenue to increase by 2 to 4%, and its annual revenue is expected to increase by 4 to 6%. Supply chain problems are everywhere, and networking equipment makers are being impacted by it too, but it looks like overall supply constraints are beginning to ease up. Next, the Department of Energy recently announced that it would be investing $45 million in cyber technology to protect power grids from cyber attacks. The DOE will use this money to fund up to 15 research projects to develop new tools to combat cybersecurity in the energy sector. The goal is to create an energy infrastructure to provide energy to every American. This is the second time the DOE has invested in cybersecurity. Back in April, it said it would invest $12 million in cybersecurity. Next in the news, it looks like Amazon is also getting the TikTok bug. Amazon has been testing a feed on its app that is similar to TikTok. This new feed, called Inspired, would allow shoppers to scroll through photos and videos of products that have been posted by other users. Additionally, users could like, save, and purchase items directly from the feed. That being said, though, it is unknown to whether Amazon will roll out this feature to all its customers, from a recent spokesperson who commented on this. On Security Boulevard, we have an article looking at a survey showing that C-level execs view cybersecurity as the biggest threat to their organizations. PwC recently released a PwC Pulse survey about managing business risks, where cybersecurity was found to be a pressing issue to many executives. The survey notes that technology is akin to the central nervous system for organizations, and there's a need to secure it. To learn more about the findings of this survey, go to Security Boulevard. On DevOps.com, we have an article looking at the results of a survey on APIs. More than 37,000 developers and API professionals took the survey. Some of the major findings include that 51% reported that more than half of their organization's development effort is spent on APIs, and 72% said that being able to build APIs remotely is extremely important. To learn more about the findings and the implications, go to DevOps.com. Finally, on Digital CXO, we have an article looking at Payless's e-commerce's comeback. Payless filed for bankruptcy in 2019 before pivoting to a more e-commerce heavy platform. But for it to succeed, it needed a digital transformation. In the past couple years, the company has shifted to using cloud and is focused on automation and optimizing their consumer experience. To learn more about Payless's story, go to Digital CXO. And that's the headlines for today. Thanks for watching.
ContainerJournal.com is the leading online destination for centralized computing-related content. ContainerJournal.com covers all aspects of software containers, from container management, data management for containers, container security, networking for containers, to the entire container ecosystem, Kubernetes, microservices, serverless, and more. ContainerJournal.com has the largest selection of container-related news, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.containerjournal.com to learn more.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Techstrong TV segment. My guest for this segment is Ray Canzanese. Ray Canzanese, depends where you are, I guess. Ray's with Netscope and he's joining us today. Hey Ray, welcome.
Hey Alan, thanks for having me.
It's our pleasure to have you on. Ray, I mentioned you're with Netscope. I didn't give your title, and I'm going to assume not everyone in the audience knows who you are, except for Ray's family and friends who have been told when he's going to be on and are tuning in, and welcome. But Ray, give people a little bit of your background, and maybe while you're at it, tell them about Netscope.
Sure. So my background is in threat protection. I am the director of Netscope Threat Labs, and we are Netscope's research arm. So we focus on all sorts of cybersecurity challenges with a focus on cloud. Netscope is a secure access service edge platform. So we sell a secure web gateway, a firewall, a private access product, an entire platform of protecting people when they're going direct to cloud in their corporate environments.
And of course, it amazes me there are still organizations who don't go direct to cloud, that are kind of backholing back in, to the LAN, from the WAN, to go back out, to come back in, to go back out. It just seems so damn wasteful, but it is what it is. Anyway, Ray, I'll be honest with you. This is about the 5th interview I've done this morning. I think 3 or 4 of them have been with research teams at various vendors. The stuff is flying. And I don't know if it's a result of Black Hat is this week, and so they're geared up for that, or we're just going through a bit of a rough patch in terms of the bad guys. It seems like the bad guys are always, living one step ahead of the law, so to speak. But Netscope recently released their big report. I don't want to take words out of your mouth. Why don't you share with our audience?
Sure. So we write one of these reports every quarter on a different topic every time. And this last one, we focused on cloud data sprawl. So in other words, we were focused not on attackers and what attackers are doing, but more on what your employees are doing at your company with cloud apps. And really the thing that's most surprising in this report is the numbers, meaning everybody understands, hey, I use a lot of cloud apps, right? I don't know. Do I use maybe 20? I mean, that's a big number, right? And so we start looking at, an organization of up to 2,000 users has, if you sum all those cloud apps up, more than 1,500 cloud apps getting used there. And so you start looking at that and you say, well, I don't upload data out of all of those apps, right? So who cares? Yeah. So, but you look at even the apps that people are uploading data to, and it's still more than 100 apps, even in an organization of under 2,000 users, where users are uploading and sending data to. And when you look at that from an organization's perspective, what do you manage centrally in your organization? 20 apps, 25 apps, 30 apps? Maybe you do 50 apps, right? It's not even close to the total number of apps that people are sending data to. And this just creates a really big mess if one of your goals is to control where all that data that you are working with ends up.
Look, a lesson that we've had to relearn, I think, during COVID times, is it's all about the data. It was always all about the data, but we got so focused on apps and WAFs and APIs and all of these things that what we forgot is that the crown jewels of the data is the data. There's so much information. And we live in an age of data sprawl. Forget 2,000 people. We're 30 people here at Techstrong. Mitchell, my CTO and longtime friend, we recently did our own little audit. If not, audit's a really big word. We didn't do a formal audit, but we did a little research study to see, hey, how many apps are we using? Where is our data? Because we're, like many companies out there, we're a SaaS company. We don't develop software. We're using third-party SaaS apps. The usual suspects. And it's scary. It's scary. Everything from our Google email, Google accounts, where each user gets 8 terabytes. Think about that. Someone my age, I was buying a 30 megabit hard drive. It was this big. 30 megs was a hard card. And I was like, what am I ever going to do with that? Everyone on our team has 8 terabytes on Google to play with. But forget, then you've got the HubSpots and the Slacks and the WordPresses and the Canvas and the Adobe stuff. And, first of all, we found that our average user here is using probably 36, 3 dozen apps.
Yep.
Which is not crazy from what I understand.
No, and that example that you shared of Google is a really interesting one, right? Because what you're saying is like you went and bought a corporate Google license and you gave everybody a Google account, but they all already probably had their own Google accounts too.
Private Gmail accounts.
Yeah, exactly.
That
right.
Stuff, right.
Yeah.
So from our point of view, how do we really know? I mean, so look, the total amount of data is staggering in terms of, terabytes or whatever. what's even scarier is, let's say it's 5 terabytes. It's 5 terabytes of dark matter as far as we know, right? Out of that 5 terabytes, I maybe know 1 terabyte of what really that data holds, right? Shared drives and stuff like that. But 4 terabytes is dark. I mean, it's just, who the hell knows? You know, we don't really have a handle on it. And we're a little nothing of a company, right? Think about a real company, you know, and what this means for them. It's scary stuff.
Right. And I mean, we're not a big company either, right? We're only about 1,500 employees now. I think when I started, we were only 400, right? When we started. But we have the same problem, right? Every individual at the company is making their own choices about what apps to use for what reasons, right? And you have people accidentally sending things up to their personal Google Drive instead of the work Google Drive. You have people accidentally syncing things to where they shouldn't be synced to. And then you have people that, you know, I need to convert this sensitive PDF to a different format. I don't know how to do that. Let me just Google and see what it says. And you get this result for some random PDF conversion service. And there you go. You have somebody who's just uploading sensitive docs to some service that they found by searching on Google, right? I mean, you just start adding this up, and this, you know, if you have no controls around it, right? Data is just going everywhere unchecked on the whim of every single individual who works at the company.
So you talk about controls.
Yeah.
So again, this is another pet peeve of mine. Forgive me for going off, but you know, we live in this work from anywhere, do anything from anywhere environment. When I tell my people you can't use that, or we're not going to do it that way anymore because it's a risk, because we don't know. You know what? No, I'm not going to buy you the full Adobe Acrobat, but you can't use the upload to convert it. Send it into someone who has full Adobe here. Welcome, you know, in company. People have the attitude that, hey, man, I do it, you know, I work from anywhere, do anything from anywhere, and I'll do anything I want. And if it's not a company tool, but it's a tool I want to use, I'm going to use it. It's my own equipment in many cases. And even if it's not my own equipment, I use it like it's my own equipment, right? And it's getting harder and harder to police that stuff.
Yeah, it is. And so what's interesting when we started looking at this, we're looking at different industry verticals to see what the differences are across the industry verticals. And I think, unsurprisingly, we found that in the banking vertical and financial services, those companies seem to have the best handle on controlling this. You know, obviously they're in regulated industries, right? They have maybe an extra incentive there. But, you know, we looked at some of the policies. We've talked to some of those companies to see what is it that they're really doing differently. And it's usually around these personal apps, you know, that you're using with your private email address and the personal instances of those apps, that they are controlling what can be uploaded there. So they let you upload things there, right? The company's not trying to prevent you from uploading pictures of your kids to your Picasa, right? Or your personal documents to your Google Drive. They're trying to prevent the company's data from going to those places, right? So they're setting up the policies that control the movement of that data specifically, so that people don't feel like you're cramping their style and telling them what they can and can't do. You're letting them do whatever they want, unless you see that it's sensitive data that's being moved. And then you say, whoa, hold on. You shouldn't be moving this data to that location. And for us, we give, you know, our clients the ability to either directly block that or to coach that. And so, meaning like we can just, you get a message that says blocked, you can't go here, versus a message that says, hey, you probably shouldn't be doing this, but if you'd like to do it anyway, please hit proceed and we'll let you do it anyway. And we found that even that, where you just sort of leave it up to the user to decide, they still usually say no, right? They realize at that point, oh, you're right, I shouldn't be doing this. This is right. But they feel like it was their decision.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's a good thing. So Ray, I've been in security a really long time. We used to call what you're describing sort of DLP, right?
Right.
Is it still called DLP, or is that?
It's still called DLP. So we definitely call it DLP. We talk about DLP when we talk to our customers. It's just that we're not talking about it maybe in the same sense we were 20 years ago, where DLP was preventing you from printing a document or moving a file to a USB drive.
Well, it never really worked so good. That was a problem with it too back then. I'm sure it's gotten a lot better.
Right. And when it's cloud delivered, you have, lots of machine learning and AI systems and exact data matching and signatures and hashes, right? There's so many technologies we have now for being able to recognize, this is a potentially sensitive data and we don't want to move it.
Absolutely. Ray, we went down the rabbit's hole here a little bit. Let's come back to the report, though. What do you think some of the other key findings are that you want to share with the audience?
Sure. Yeah. So one of the big ones is when we're looking at data being uploaded to, let's call them personal apps and personal instances, we see more than 20% of all users doing that regularly, right? So there's just like an awful lot of data going there. So obviously that's going to be a mix of personal data and company data, right? Depending on who's doing what. But then when somebody's leaving the organization is typically when things get much worse. And we found that in that last 30 days before somebody leaves, the amount of data they start moving into those personal apps just starts increasing and increasing because they're basically packing their bags to go. And the way they're doing it is usually by throwing everything into their own, Gmail account or their own OneDrive account so that they can keep everything on the way out. And obviously that's a big concern for security teams, right? Who, in the last stages of somebody's employment are trying to make sure that nobody's taking anything they shouldn't be taking.
Agreed. What else you got for us from the report, you think, that people would want to know about?
So I think when we talk about controls and what's working, I think that by volume, the personal data, the data that's going places it shouldn't go, it's mostly the OneDrives, the Google Drives, the Dropboxes, the boxes. I think people assume that it's things they can easily block. Oh, it's just some bad app that people shouldn't be using. It's not like that. It's much more nuanced. It's the same apps that everybody's using all the time. So unless you have the tools in place that can inspect that traffic, that can tell the difference between when you're using your official at netscope.com email address versus your at gmail.com email address. Unless you have a technology that can do that, this is really hard stuff to police from just a technical point of view.
It really is. I mean, look, I tell you another scenario I think that makes it, if I had hair, I'd pull it out, is, for someone like me, so I have a lot of Apple devices, right? I have my MacBooks, my iMacs, my watches, my phones, my iPads. And obviously with my Apple devices, I have iCloud.
Yeah.
And like everyone else, the extra 99 cents a month quickly ran out. And now I'm up to $2.99 a month, and I forget how many gigabytes I got there, right? And that, I try to make that personal.
Yeah.
Right? Not put my work stuff there. My Apple ID's a personal ID, not a work ID. Then I have my Microsoft Office, right? Kind of stuff, and I have a OneDrive account with that. And for whatever reason, years ago, that's where I made my work versus private, personal stuff, right? So I have the OneDrive. Also not under a work address.
Right.
Then, of course, I mentioned the 8 terabyte Google Drive under a work address. I don't know. I think the Google Drive integration for me was never as good on the Apple devices as OneDrive and iCloud were. So I tend to, what obviously goes in there, but if there's a question, it usually winds up in OneDrive. I have found my OneDrive, Ray, to be polluted, right? Between personal and work stuff. And if it happens to me, it can happen to you out there, right? And this, that's where I think you really start running into stuff, right? Because you're kind of faster and looser with your personal than maybe you would be with your work accounts. And if you've got your work stuff up there, you get ransomed, you get whatever, you're in trouble.
Right. And I think that's a really nice way of putting it, right? Like the pollution of your personal with all your work stuff. Because, I mean, most people watching this, right, are reacting saying, well, I'm not a bad person, right? I'm not trying to steal things from my employer. I would never knowingly move work data to somewhere where it shouldn't go, right? But what's happening is not typically knowingly moving the data to where it shouldn't go, right? It's sort of accidentally ending up, especially this iCloud thing is a thorn in the side of so many organizations whose users are using Macs, and they just go in there and tell everybody, just disable it. Stop using that iCloud backup because we don't want all of your work data ending up in your iCloud backups, because you have, as the organization, you lose all control over that. And now as the individual, you're going to make sure for the rest of your life, you safeguard that data as if you were still working at that job you left years ago. I mean, it's just no way to protect data that way.
Absolutely. Hey, Ray, for people who want to get more information about the report, maybe figure out some ways they can help themselves, what's the best place to go to for that?
Yeah, so you can go to our netscope.com/threatlabs website. That will give you this report, our monthly reports, and all of our blog posts as we put them out, all on that one page. So that's netscope.com/threatlabs.
That's beautiful. So that's this quarter's report. You want to give us a preview, at least, of what next quarter's report's on, or you're not allowed to say yet?
Next quarter's report is going to be interesting because we're going to talk a lot about the risks that come within the apps and the app ecosystems themselves. So we're going to talk a little bit about phishing attacks that go directly after your OneDrive account. And we're just going to talk about how often people go and they click on that button, would you like to allow this app access to OneDrive? Right? Everybody knows what the answer to that question is. It's yes, because if I say no, you're not going to let me do what I'm trying to do.
Exactly. All right. Hey, Ray, thanks for coming on and giving us a little insight into this, and great work on the report. Come back next quarter. Let's talk about the next one.
All right, thanks a lot, Alan.
All righty. We're going to take a break here on Techstrong TV. It's been a crazy morning. We've got more for you, though. Stay tuned.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, welcome to another Techstrong TV segment here. I am really happy. She hasn't been on in way too long. My friend Jen Miller-Osborne from Unit 42 over at Palo Alto. Hey Jen, how are you?
Hi, I am doing well. How are you? It's good to see you again.
It's good to see you. I hope you've been doing well over the last couple of months. It's been exciting kind of times, I guess. It's always exciting in security. There's so much stuff flying around, but all good. Hey, Jen, for those who maybe are not, I'm sure all of our audience knows Palo Alto Networks, but they may not be familiar with Unit 42. Give them a quick little background and maybe a little bit of your background.
Sure. So Unit 42 is both the threat intelligence and the security component part of Palo Alto Networks. Previously, before we had the consulting arm, we were just the threat intelligence arm. And the company realized when we were bringing on an incident response firm that the most natural fit was within Unit 42 because what attackers were doing post-compromise was really the only data point we were missing from a threat intelligence perspective previously. So this that filled that gap. So now we have the two components that run one that's the incident response side, and then we have the threat intelligence side.
Right, and it kind of makes sense, right? You get your threat intel, and the logical kind of next shoe to drop is, okay, what happens here when it hits you, right? And so what's our incident response? And those are both, for someone like me who's been in security a really long time, where it was all about prevention, right? The idea of threat intel and then incident response was, when they first became kind of mainstream, was like, wow, this is different. But it's kind of, standard operating procedure now, right? If you're, especially an enterprise, but any organization out there, you've got to be, thinking about threat intel and incident response. So it makes sense. And of course, Unit 42 at Palo Alto is one of the premier organizations in that industry. Jen, what about you? For people who are not familiar with your background.
Yeah, I am the Deputy Director of Threat Intelligence with Unit 42 here. Before coming to Unit 42, this is actually my first job in the private sector. I spent almost 10 years in the Air Force as a Chinese Mandarin translator, and then that's also where I was able to start getting into cybersecurity when it was a nascent field, and they were looking for people that were kind of computer geeks, basically, that had an interest in giving it a try. From there, I did contracting for a number of different three-letter agencies, also with a focus in cybersecurity. And then I came here to Unit 42, and I've been here ever since.
Very cool. Appreciate it. So, Jen, let's jump into what we want to talk about today, which is, we were talking off camera that I've been traveling a bunch, and I took a little vacation in Greece, and we were on this big 120-foot boat, which was, to me, this was crazy. But one of the things I learned that they say on boats is there's always a bigger boat. And it's the same thing with malware. There's always a worse malware, unfortunately, right? So it looks like we have a case of a worse malware coming out now that you guys have kind of led the charge on. Why don't you educate us?
Yeah. So what we've seen with cybersecurity over the years, and I don't think this will be a surprise to any of the audience, is we've seen attackers increasingly trying to figure out new ways to be successful, adding on to their malware, adding new capabilities. And what we have here, it's a tool called Brute Retel C4. It's actually a red teaming tool. That's what it was designed for. It was red teaming and pen testing. So it's meant to be legitimately used by organizations who are testing their own defenses. What we've seen, unfortunately, and this is very similar to what we've seen with Cobalt Strike as well, where it was developed intending for good. It was developed as a red team or a pen testing tool, but because you're developing something to test defenses and see if you can compromise something, it also makes that very attractive to malicious actors if they can actually get their hands on it, because it's often very fully featured, has a lot of functionality, can be easy to use because it was designed to be sold to professional teams. The new one that we're seeing now, Cobalt Strike in and of itself has been just a headache for everyone in the industry and continues to be so. And this new one is unique in that the developer wrote it with the goal of getting around endpoint detection solutions and their protections. He has a background from both CrowdStrike and Mandiant, so he has a lot of experience in this field before he moved into producing this tool. And what we saw when we were reversing it and when we were running our tests, very few vendors had out-of-the-box protections for this. And it was very, very difficult to actually create protections for. It's very challenging. It's going to be, or it already is now, the next Cobalt Strike, as it were.
Look, this is not new. As you mentioned, Cobalt Strike. And I'm drawing a blank. The open source pen testing tool, HD Moore.
Metasploit.
It's terrible to get old. Look, people were using Metasploit for this years and years and years ago because that was an open source tool.
Yep.
So every bad guy who wanted it got their hands on it. Now, I'm not blaming HD and the Metasploit people. I'm not blaming the people behind Cobalt Strike. I'm not even going to blame this person, right? tools, we need, these tools have a legitimate purpose. It's when they're misused in the wrong hands that we have this. And I guess the real issue is, how do you prevent the bad guys from getting their hands on this stuff? Right? In the case of open source, it's impossible. But in the case of these tools that are not necessarily open source, what do we, what do you do?
What we've seen with some of the other companies is they'll have contract language when they're selling the licenses that it can only be used for legitimate purposes or pen testing, red teaming. Whether or not the person who's buying it intends to hold to that can be a different story. And then the more these tools are used in different legitimate attempted red teaming and pen testing exercises, the more chance there is for one of the samples to end up somewhere public, like on VirusTotal. That's actually where we found the first sample of this was there. And then it's outside of the developer's hands at that point. And that's, how we got a hold of it to reverse it. That's how attackers are getting a hold of it to use it. We've seen some ransomware families definitely starting to adopt this tool and use it in place of Cobalt Strike, because they've also recognized how functional it is and how useful it can be for them. And it's that constant, you write these tools, they're meant to be for the defenders to be able to help you, or for your administrators to be able to more easily take care of the networks. And then the problem is that those exact same tools that are meant for that can then also be used by attackers, because they're trying to carry out the same sorts of activities within your network or against your network. They're just trying to do them for malicious purposes.
Absolutely. I mean, with all due respect, putting a contract clause in there that says this should only be used for lawful purposes, it sounds like if you outlaw guns, only outlaws have guns. The bad guys don't give a crap. They don't, you know what I mean? They don't care what it says in the contract, because what they're doing is illegal anyway, right? Yep. And so I'm wondering if there isn't some other kind of, is there a biometric or two-factor or something that, hey, you've got this software, but before it can function, you've got to get a one-time use code, or you've got to, you got to do something that validates you are who you say you are, and you're using it for the purpose you say you're using it, so that we can rapidly trace back, right, with a verification of identity and stuff like that, of whose hands it's in. And maybe that'll be too much of a PIA for the legitimate users and impede the use of the tool. But when you weigh, balancing the good and the bad here, maybe it's worth it.
Yeah, it could be. I think one of the things is, once these are going to get out, you're just kind of stuck. For Brute Ratel, there are specific keys, at least. So the author says there are specific keys by customer by contract. And he noted that if you would send him those, then he'll disable the accounts doing malicious activity. Because once it's sold, they don't necessarily know how it's going to be used either. If they're selling it thinking this is someone who's using it for legitimate purposes, unless someone that actually gets hacked with it contacts them to be like, hey, this was your tool that happened. There's no way for the developers to even really know that it's being used that way.
Absolutely. And again, I'm not blaming the developers. I'm not saying we don't need these tools. There's a legitimate need for these kinds of tools. I just, there's got to be a better way, I think, because, a tool like this, right? So this one is a generation ahead of Cobalt Strike. It evades endpoint detection. What's the next one going to be, right? And the one after that. And, if we can't, we've got to put some common sense, not to sound like a politician, but we've got to put some common sense restrictions here. Because otherwise, what are we supposed to do? What's Unit 42 going to do, right? We've got some threat intel. I guess it's good business for the incident response piece of it, huh? But, I mean, how do you stop this?
That's why we wrote up the blog and made sure it was technical enough that other organizations could figure out how to put protections in place, because we recognized not only did we need to do research and up our protections, but that it was likely a lot of other people in the industry were going to be in the same space. So we chose to publish it. We pre-briefed a number of governments about it in advance to make them aware that this was a new threat that they should be looking for. We really just tried to drive the level of community awareness that this was a tool being used for malicious activity now. And here, at least when we published, that was the current version. So here's, information that you can use to get a leg up and actually be able to detect this and defend against it. Because, yeah, to your point, that's the only real way people know is if there's word out there that it's happening.
Yeah, well, look, shining a light on these dark underbellies of the net where this kind of bad crap happens is always a good thing to do. You know what? For people who want to get more information around this, where could you mention the blog post? Where can they get that?
It is a very long URL. It is unit42.paloaltonetworks.com. And you'll get to our blog site. And this research is there, as well as, all of our research is there. And we also recently published our first incident response paper. So there's links to that and the highlights of what we found there as well, if people haven't seen that yet.
Very cool. It's not that hard to remember, guys. It's Unit 42, that's the number 42.paloaltonetworks.com. Excellent. So, Jen, we're filming this Black Hat DEF CON week. You're home, I'm home, we didn't go. Any big news, though, coming out of Black Hat from the Unit 42 team that you're free to talk about?
One of our members, Michael Sikorsky, will actually be giving a talk on Cobalt Strike and Brute Ratel and what that means for the community, that tools like this are being abused and weaponized, and what we need to look out for and how we can potentially get ahead of that kind of problem.
All right. So for our friends watching this, by the time you see it, Black Hat's probably over, because this probably won't play till at least later this week, early next week. But definitely check that out if you're there. Jen, anything else exciting you want to share with the audience?
So just, same old, same old. It's always interesting in this field.
I hear you.
I'm sure we'll talk again the next time that this tool gets an update and we need to share more about its possibility for abuse.
Is if we don't see you, Jen, that means things are generally simmering, not boiling over. That's, I guess,
that is true.
Thing.
Never mind. I want it to be quiet for a while.
Yes, that would be nice. Hey, stay cool out there. Thanks for coming on. It's a pleasure to see you as always, and keep up the great work to you and the whole Unit 42 team, Jen.
Thank you. Good to see you too.
All right. Jen Miller Osborne from Unit 42 Palo Alto Networks here on Techstrong TV. We'll take a break, and we're going to be back in a moment with another guest.
DevOps.com is the #1 online destination for DevOps education and community building. DevOps.com covers all aspects of DevOps, including DevOps best practices and tools, DevOps culture, DevSecOps, business impact, continuous testing, continuous delivery, and more. DevOps.com has the largest collection of original DevOps content, featuring breaking news, blog posts, podcasts, and more. Visit www.devops.com to learn more. DevOps.com, where the world meets DevOps.
Hey everyone, happy Monday. Cody J. Brown here with some upcoming programs from Techstrong Learning. So first, tomorrow, Tuesday, August 23rd at 1 p.m. Eastern on DevOps.com, join us for Transforming the Database. critical innovations for performance at scale. ScyllaDB engineers will provide an inside look at innovations dev teams are using to improve performance and prioritize workloads. On Wednesday, August 24th at 11 a.m. Eastern, DevOps.com and Metallic present Modern Data Protection with Metallic Data Management as a Service, Hybrid, Kubernetes, and beyond. So this program will unpack the critical need for dedicated data protection and how Metallic Data Management as a Service safeguards your data from deletion, corruption, and ransomware attacks. Finally, on Wednesday, August 24th at 1 p.m. Eastern, Security Boulevard and Snowflake present Implementing Identity Access Prioritization and Risk-Based Alerting for High-Fidelity Alerts. This session will review how to prioritize your identity and assets and dynamically adjust alert severity based on prioritization. So that's all I've got for you right now, but we do have plenty of upcoming programs and on-demand programs for you here at Techstrong Learning.
The Engineering the Change Scholarship Program offers a life-changing opportunity for a winner from an underrepresented community to change their lives by becoming a full-stack software developer.
The background that you might see that it's a weakness, it's a strength in this field because everyone is constantly looking for people that are going to bring new ideas.
It's an intense 12-week course that is not for the timid.
For real, who's mastering this right now? Because I sure am not.
So you guys are badass. Like as a class, you guys are crushing it.
You've got to be dedicated. You've got to be ready to do it. Your life has to be ready for it. Follow us as we go through this cohort's Engineering the Change winner on their journey to becoming full-stack engineers.
Say with great power comes great responsibility.
Got to take it down to 3 finalists. Toria, I'm going to ask you, who really kind of stood out for you?
The 3 people that stood out to me the most was Stephanie and another woman named Carly and a man named Donald.
Mitchell, what do you think?
Yeah, I think I agree. Actually, I think those are 3 great candidates, and I mean, you know very well, right, what it takes to go through this process.
Look, I still love good written and oral skills. I like people who can speak well. I like people who really could write well.
All right.
And I'm going to tell you something. To your point about Stephanie, is it Stephanie Sanchez? Yeah, Stephanie Sanchez. Her essay was one of the best essays I've ever read in the 3 or 4 times we've done this.
Yeah.
Okay.
And bring her into
the golden
finals.
buzzer. Right?
So,
she's in.
The 2 other people you mentioned, to me, Carly epitomizes why we do this.
Yeah.
She said something like, her brothers could do it, why couldn't she? Mm-hmm. Right? Wasn't that in the essay?
Yeah, that's something that stuck with me, especially as a woman.
Yeah.
Because I think that for her, she was like, if they can do it, and there's not enough women in tech, like she was like, I can do it too, and I love that.
I say send Carly to Hollywood.
Golden buzzer?
Yeah. Donald Bazell, really nice guy. What I liked about his essay is his genuineness. Is that a word?
Yeah, being genuine.
He's genuine.
Yeah.
Right? You got it from him. My only caveat on this is he really doesn't have any tech experience.
Yeah.
So if it's your vote and Mitchell, you don't object, I say let's give Donald the last ticket to Hollywood. And those are our 3 finalists for Engineering the Change. Let's bring them in for interviews and pick our winner.
Okay.
Sounds fun.
Sounds
All
good.
right. We'll see you on the next show.
Looking for a live conference focused on the tools, technologies, and practices most important to your business? Innotech conferences are live one-day business and technology conferences highlighting the latest in trends for IT leaders, developers, and IT professionals. Each event combines education, innovation, peer-to-peer networking, and the latest technology and business solutions for a diverse IT-focused audience. Innotech conferences occur throughout the year in strategic regional locations, bringing together technology professionals from various industries to learn about the solutions, practices, and tools impacting their day-to-day work and gain insight into what's to come. Presenters at Innotech conferences are selected and curated to ensure each session provides the most up-to-date and relevant information without any hype. Whether you're interested in digital transformation, cybersecurity, cloud, IT leadership, or DevOps, Innotech conferences deliver. 2022 events are scheduled to be held in Austin, Dallas, Oklahoma City, Houston, and Washington, D.C. Innotech conferences are produced by Techstrong Live and powered by Techstrong Group.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Well, welcome back. I had said we had some more great interviews, and we do, just like our last one. I'm joined by Steve Jaguar, who is, tell me your role at Bridge Crew again?
I'm a developer advocate.
Developer advocate. Who knew, at a developer conference? How does that work?
Surprise.
What do you know? So Bridge Crew, which is part of Prisma Cloud.
Correct.
When you were acquired during the pandemic, if I remember.
We're not all around very long. We came out of stealth. We were, I think that was during the pandemic, even just before.
Oh, wow.
And then about a year into it, we were acquired by people we never met.
I didn't know when you were going to meet.
And then suddenly we're here at KubeCon, finally, and it's amazing.
It's an interesting path or top leap over path or whatever it is.
Yeah, it's weird.
Well, tell us about Bridge Crew. We're talking about Chekhov. Yep. Tell us a little bit about what you all do.
Well, sure. I'll start with Bridge Crew. Bridge Crew is an infrastructure as code and cloud security solution, but it is founded on open source, which is the t-shirt I'm obviously wearing as a shameless plug. Chekhov. Chekhov is a scanner you can use for free that scans pretty much any declarative infrastructure as code. So that's a pretty wide range, isn't it? It's like Terraform, Kubernetes YAML, of course. Mm-hmm. All the strange derivatives of that, like Helm and Kustomize, are covered as well. And that's kind of what we're going for, is make sure that we get as much of that as easy as possible for developers. And I sound like I'm advertising now, but I've said it a few times today.
You probably have said this before, yeah. I'm curious, I started my security work back when sort of vulnerability scanning meant network scanning, right? What's different about that today in a cloud infrastructure stack software environment? Or is it some of the same, just applied differently?
It definitely is some of the same. The advantages of infrastructure as code is that you can just do the whole of that earlier. You know what's going to happen because you've defined all of your interactions between your cloud resources. You've done it via Terraform. You've done all of your Kubernetes and applications via Kubernetes YAML manifests. So you know what's going to happen before it happens, or at least you should. Mm-hmm. Add into that container image references, both in Terraform and in YAML. And if you can scan those, and you have your vulnerabilities, then you kind of have all the information you need to do a very, very shift-left version of what we used to do.
Yeah, so it's interesting. And declarative environment is the big thing that's different, of course, than YAML and Helm and everything you used to.
You got it. Yeah,
define those
we're
environments.
Defining the state, so why don't we check it? Well, why wait till runtime?
So interesting, developer advocate. Do you find that like platform engineers are often your entry point into an organization, or is it usually more developers, software architects?
Well, it's funny, it would have been, a few years back. I think the whole DevOps movement means that I'm talking to a lot of multifaceted individuals now. Some of them are developers, some of them are developers who have gone into ops, some are true DevOps that are just building vast, complicated pipelines. So it's no surprise that right now everyone's talking about supply chain security, because the role has moved into the creation of supply chain almost as an internal product. And those tend to be the people that we're talking to when we're not talking to security people, of course.
Yep, you do have to talk to them.
Unfortunately, yes.
Yes. So let's talk about supply chain integrity. Lots of examples. Log4j was we've always had supply chain integrity issues. It's just we know about a few because of how widely and widespread they're used. Log4j being an example. What do you think is, what are we missing about supply chain integrity that we really have to take more seriously as a development organization?
It's funny, what are we missing about supply chain security is kind of there's a lot of answers to that. There's some really great projects like SigStore, which is here, which is doing signing of all artifacts, and that goes back to sort of the SolarWinds style infiltration of the entire build process. That's something that we have to look at.
That's what most people don't realize. SolarWinds was an infiltration into the build, software build. That's where it
was
really started.
Very clever. So that's something that's gaining a lot of momentum now, but it's so complicated that we're just not at all there. The more short-term solution is things like what we're trying to do is make sure that you can see your supply chain. So like, for example, something we just added to Bridgecrew is because we have all this infrastructure as code, all of this declared in nature, you can now see it in the tool. So you can see this is going to be your edge, and these are all the connectivities of all the resources you're creating as they go all the way back to where your vulnerabilities live. So if you need to search to see if you've got something like Log4j, and you want to know if it's accessible, that's kind of where we're focusing on now. And I'm sure we're not alone in doing that.
Well, it makes sense too. It's not just what you have or software decomposition, it's what's being used and what's exposed. And
what's exposed, it's about context. I think a lot of people can get really tired of looking at vulnerabilities.
We used to call them the barking dog, right?
Yeah.
Like I don't need another log message saying I have a vulnerability I don't need to worry about.
Yeah, it's funny. I used to work for a SaaS company, and it was just, noise was a big problem. And certainly now tool fatigue, all of this is a problem that we're trying to address by making sure that, sure, we're going to tell you things are wrong, but we'd like to give you the information you need and the context you need so that you know exactly where your fixed location has to be to make sure that you feel like 99% safe.
I'm curious, I imagine you can play in a lot of different ways in the software development process, but is there one area where you tend to stand out more? Is it during the build process and doing scan, and as that environment's constantly changing, infrastructure as code? Is it assessing a current environment and understanding what you have and what's vulnerable? Is it maybe as an audit tool to look at third-party environments? I mean, where do you typically shine the best? Or is it something else other than that?
Well, I think originally we were a command line tool that scanned Terraform, but now I think where we shine the best is actually in the IDE. We have integrations for VS Code, and we have integrations for JetBrains, and the idea now is very much like, I think a little bit like GitHub Copilot, where as you're creating Terraform or as you're creating YAML, there's a plugin there that's actually telling you, whoa, you didn't do this, or you're about to do that, or you left that unencrypted, or you don't have your CPU and memory requirements here. So it's giving you the information built into the IDE, so it's both secure, but for developers it's educational. And it's a very soft and gentle education so that they're not feeling like security.
So the light bulb in your code like the JetBrains does, not the, the klaxon alert.
Yeah. That's exactly what we're doing in JetBrains, and then in VS Code, it's a little squiggle. So you hover over it and you're like, oh, right. And in VS Code, we have the ability to even say, would you like me to fix it for you? And you say, okay. I like when people fix my code for me. And then you have more secure code. So you're like, all right. I mean, if everybody used Checkoff and everyone used the VS Code and everyone did everything it said, we would never sell our commercial products. But that's never happened.
Yeah, I don't see that. I mean, let me know how that goes. Well, it's interesting too because there's so much shifted left. We talked about that in the security world and DevOps. You can't rely on the developer to do everything. They can't be an expert at everything.
Correct.
So shift left isn't just about putting on the developer's shoulders, solving all these problems. So building it into the process, into the automation, into the tools. We just want it to happen earlier, right, in the process.
Exactly.
So it really makes sense that you build it into an IDE.
Well, that's almost the most left. I mean, you're right. Shift left is almost got a bit of a bad reputation because it sounds like we're dumping our security woes on the poor developers who already have deadlines and things to get done, which often have nothing to do with security. We really just don't want to do it all the way on the right. That's just the really expensive, low resource way of doing it.
Where it gets compromised.
It's where you get compromised. Yeah, you don't want to go with, certainly defense in depth is required. Monitoring solutions are definitely required still, but you want them to do nothing. You want to make sure that you haven't got a very, very secure house, but left the keys dangling out of the back door, which I myself have done many times in reality. So we want to make sure that we kind of sprinkle it left as far as we can. I mean, I think the reality is the CI is like the ROI, that's the best place because
that is the meeting point, right?
It's the meeting point of everything. Ops people are familiar with it. If you make it simple, like a GitHub action or a Circle CI orb or whatever it is you need, so that all the security just plugs in, then that's great. That's about as left as we would realistically expect people to go, but we're just trying to make it so easy that even that is a very minimal hurdle.
Where does your knowledge base of vulnerabilities come from? Are you taking that from logs from open source projects or documentation? Are you doing your own research, combination of both, or something else?
It is a lot of research. The Terraform, the initial list of Terraform ones came from our CTO, Barak, who just did a ton of research and created a ton of rules. Now it's coming from the community because we have a huge contributor base in Chekhov, so that's really great. People just check in slews of new rules that we didn't even really thought were good ideas. We have to approve them and make sure that they're sensible. Personally, I contribute to Chekhov, so last week I added rules for GitHub action workflows. And that was just pure research on abusing GitHub action workflows to find out what I could do.
You have too much time on your hands abusing GitHub workflows.
That's the fun part.
No, actually, that kind of stuff is fun.
Yeah.
You know, kind of breaking things.
I did some pretty terrible things.
Did you? Okay. Yeah. We'll leave that for another show.
Yeah.
Not sure we have the proper rating for that, but that's a whole other topic. Anyway, anything particular about the show and KubeCon that's, ties into what you do and you're excited about, other than mass amount of developers? Because there's 7,000 people here.
Yeah, that is good. On the obvious things of humans, wow.
Yeah, what do we do now?
What do I do? I have to learn how to talk again.
Yeah.
I think the focus on supply chain, I mean, that's where we're going. It's nice to see the confirmation that that's where we're all looking at right now. I mean, I was at the SecureCon, the Day Zero event before this started. Met a lot of great people, talked to a lot of people about what they're doing in terms of supply chain. And so it's sometimes you're operating not in a competitive way, like we're all security companies, but we all know each other. So we meet and we collaborate at events like this to make sure that everything we're doing, be it open source or commercial, becomes better for the supply chain security or security as a whole. So I really enjoy that.
Very cool. Well, Steve Jaguar, thanks for joining us today. Have a great show and hope you do well. It's exciting to be in person. Nice to see you in person too.
Thanks very much for having me.
So definitely check out Bridge Crew, Chekhov, and Open Source. A great name, too. Great writer, of course, as well. Thanks for joining us. We have more great interviews coming up. So don't go away. We'll be right back.
CISO Talk, to hear how real-world CISOs are dealing with today's real-world issues. From enabling secure remote workers to accelerating secure cloud adoption, defending against a pandemic of security attacks and beyond, CISO Talk covers the cyber topics you want to learn about. With your hosts, Unisys CISO Matt Newfield and MediaOps CEO Alan Schimmel, featuring a revolving panel of CISO cyber experts. This is where CISOs talk. Join us on digitalanarchist.com and Techstrong TV.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Steve Wilson, who's Chief Product Officer for Contrast Security. We're going to be talking about zero-day vulnerabilities and how much fun they are lately. Steve, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks a lot, Mike. Happy to be here.
These things are in the news these days. It seems like every, 2 months or so, maybe 3, somebody's waking up in the morning and discovering that there's some new zero-day vulnerability. Most infamous being Log4j Shell that a lot of people are still out there looking for. I guess the question is is there some way to get in front of all this stuff or some way to respond faster? Because it looks like right now, we're tearing our hair out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think part of the reason that we're all tearing our hair out is this is accelerating, right? I mean, there have been 0 days happening for a long time, but especially in this open source space and around these large ecosystems like Java, it used to be once every few years, and now it feels like it's once every few weeks. So it's just rapidly accelerating. So maybe the strategies that people have developed the last few years aren't enough. And, when you think about the strategies people are using, they're inherently reactive. So, you think about running a set of composition analysis tools on your source code for your application that tell you when a 0 day has been discovered. And so now you're in a race with every hacker in the world to patch up your systems. There are a bunch of ways, though, to look at really getting ahead of these things. And these include doing really deep inspection on your applications using things like interactive application security testing that can actually help you find those vulnerabilities before they're publicly announced. And then ways to build defenses into your applications, things like runtime protection, where you can actually protect yourself from these exploits even before the vulnerabilities are known and announced.
How quickly are the bad guys exploiting those 0 day vulnerabilities? Do I have days, weeks, months, or is it more like hours and minutes before somebody starts pounding on these things?
So the bad news is it's worse than that. When Log4j happened last December, we have a set of technologies to do runtime protection on applications where we didn't have to know about the Log4j exploit because we protect against generic exploits for things like log injection. And so what we were able to do was rewind back in time through our telemetry on our customers' applications and see that hackers were already trying to exploit that vulnerability more than 2 weeks before it was announced. These are open source communities full of lots of different characters. And while there's a lot of care putting into trying to manage these things from the time that they might be exposed from an ethical hacker till the time that they're patched, there can be a lot of exposure there. And so really, if you wait for the 0 day announcement, you're already way behind the curve.
All right. Well, there's nothing quite like being the last to know. How much, therefore, should security be shifting left? Because there seems to be a debate as to whether or not it should go all the way to the developer or it should go just to the DevOps team and lean left because the developers are never going to figure out the security issues fully. So, or is this one of those situations where the correct answer is all of the above?
Look, it's easy to say all of the above because at some level it's true. But I think the classic AppSec approach that's been dominated and driven by a security team that's separate from development is known to not work. That's a system where you're doing scans maybe once a quarter. So not only do you not find out about it on day 0, you might not find out about a problem until day 90. And then you're way behind the curve. And, when you think about us being more than 6 months past Log4j and people still finding that they're exposed for it, that's part of the reason. So you certainly have to shift left. You have to get earlier in the dev cycle. Developers need to start to understand these security issues and how they can really get involved in finding them and fixing them. And, this term DevSecOps, I'm not sure that term is durable because I think at some point it just folds into being part of DevOps. But it's the same kind of evolution that we had between Dev and Ops before. We're just throwing it over a wall to another group and hoping they'll manage the application correctly. It's just as naive to think you can throw your app over a wall and someone else will take care of the security.
We've been talking about DevSecOps for a while, and I think everybody kind of nods their head when the sermon is given. But somehow or other, I feel like, the minute they exit the proverbial church, they forget all about it. So what are we going to do to make DevSecOps kind of stick?
It's been interesting. I've been at Contrast for almost 2 years now, and I've seen a lot of movement in the space in that 2 years. We work with hundreds of the world's largest corporations, governments on helping secure their applications. And there's been a real meaningful shift during that time in terms of how people are looking at this life cycle. I'd say when I got here, developers really weren't conscious of this. It was only a fringe that was thinking about it. Now it's really becoming mainstream. The trends are we see more and more. We see the development teams getting involved in selecting security tools, getting involved in operating them. There's still a long way to go, but there's been a tremendous shift in the last 1 to 2 years.
Well, what should the ideal relationship between those teams be? Because we all know there's a cultural divide there, and for years, people were throwing spreadsheets over the wall with a bunch of vulnerabilities that were routinely ignored. So how do we kind of make this better?
Yeah. Look, at my job before I came to Contrast, I lived through this, leading a large development organization where I had the head of engineering come to me one day and say, "Hey, Steve, I got to cancel the roadmap next quarter," and then explain to me that the security team had run a scan and filed 1,000 bug tickets on the code base. Were there 1,000 real vulnerabilities there? Absolutely not. There weren't more than a handful, but it was incredibly disruptive to everything involved: schedules, deliverables, and just personal tension and strife within the company. So that throw it over the wall attitude has to change. So I think it's got to come from both sides. First off, the security team needs to, and I think they're starting to acknowledge that delivering software is what drives the business. It is the most directly correlated thing to your company being successful, is that you're able to deliver better software faster. That's what most companies in the world compete on. So you can't take the attitude that you're a blocker and that security is more important than everything else. On the other hand, the development teams have been just as guilty of this, saying, the security stuff, it's all a bunch of hokum. I don't need to worry about that. I just need to get my code out. And, I'm willing to throw it over the wall to you guys, and you guys do something about it. It's really about a spirit of cooperation, and it's really about being one team. And you may have specialists in different areas, and you're going to have some specialists on your team who have deep application security knowledge, who are going to help you understand a new class of vulnerability that your tools have helped you find, or help you find the best tools or the best ways to integrate that into your pipelines. But much the same way that today there's virtually no wall between QA and development. I remember when I started developing, we wrote code and we threw it over a wall to another team called QA. And then weeks later, they would send us back bugs. That doesn't work. That hasn't worked in a long time. And security is going through that same transformation.
Do you think as we go along that, I don't know, maybe will AI save us from ourselves? Or there are advances in technology that we can look forward to here that might solve some of these issues?
The funny thing about things like security is you would hope there's going to be a magic silver bullet from a technology point of view. But things like AI are an arms race. You can develop more and more sophisticated mechanisms for detection and protection using machine learning techniques. But you have to know that the bad guys are doing the same thing. And in fact, the bad guys who are very well funded, nation state actors and everything else, you better believe that they're deeply invested in things like AI. So I do think that the industry needs to be looking really hard at how to bring more and more advanced techniques to bear. The standard static code scan is just outdated, or at least it's only one tool in your arsenal. You need a much more sophisticated set of tools that have deep hooks into the application that don't just look at the source code, but can also look at how it's performing while it's running. You don't need just application security testing. You need application protection built into the app so that it can, in sort of the spirit of zero trust, that app doesn't have to depend on some other firewall or something like that to keep it safe. It's got to be built in.
Are there best practices for scanning? Because you talk to some folks and they're like, well, I just wrote a small amount of code, so I won't scan that. And then I'll just keep adding more and more small amounts of code. And then suddenly it's the end of the week and there's this massive ball of code that hasn't been scanned. So is there a better way to thinking about scanning?
Well, so the funny thing is developers sometimes view these things as a burden. And look, there's a lot of cognitive overload when you're a developer. There are so many things shifting. You're trying to move to the cloud. You're trying to move to Agile. You're trying to adopt all these new practices and learn a new programming language. So you have to acknowledge that. But I remember those early days as a developer where we'd code and then somebody would do a big test blitz 2 months later and send back bugs. And your development team's looking at these bugs going, well, what could have changed? Why did this regress? And you have 2 months worth of code to sift through to try and figure out what could have changed. Now, when we have modern integration testing, you're going to find out most of those things, if not within hours, at least within a day of when you made the changes. So you're like, wow, well, I know what I worked on yesterday. I know what broke. Let me go look at fixing that. Security can be the same way. So when you build security into your pipeline in a deep way. So first off, you want it in your, at the latest in your integration test pipeline so that you're getting your security test results the same time that you're getting your quality test results. It can't be any less frequent than that. The other thing that developers really like is being able to have, for example, a scanner that they can run on their laptop before they commit their code. Because the last thing a developer wants is to get called out by somebody else that they just created a bad bug that they got to go backtrack and fix. And so there are tools now. Contrast has a tool called CodeSec. It's totally free. Developers can download it. They can scan their applications in seconds or minutes, get an instant set of results. And then you can actually build that into the front end of your pipeline so that when you do a pull request to integrate your code back into the source base, it gets scanned really quickly, get your set of results instantly, and those security bugs never even get back into the code base.
So let me ask you, can we make our applications more secure without slowing down the rate at which they are being built, or is that just an impossible goal?
You absolutely can. And I think not only can you make it not hurt, you can make it better. That's the key thing, is that by really making security part of the Agile process and not something from the outside, you don't wind up with these infrequent large disruptions. You don't wind up with these crisis management situations where somebody files 1,000 tickets on you, or you wind up with a 0 day that you're not prepared for. By integrating this in and early and having the right tools in place and having everyone on the team from development through the security team be working together, you can make the security part of this really transparent, where it's not today. Today, it's a big drag on productivity for a lot of organizations. So don't think of sort of moving to security as something that's going to be a big burden in the long term. It's something that's going to lift the burden off your developers. It's going to empower them. It's going to accelerate them and really be net a huge uplift on productivity while reducing the risk for the organization.
All right, folks, you heard it here first. There's not much we can do about the bad guys, but we're certainly making it a little too easy for them right now. Hey, Steve, thanks for being on the show.
Hey, thanks a lot, Mike.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey guys, thanks for the throw. We're here with Jeffrey Martin, who's Vice President of Product for Mend. And we're going to be talking about what goes on with application security these days and all things vulnerabilities. Jeffrey, welcome to the show.
Nice to meet you. Nice to be here, I should say. I've met you many times.
It feels like, we kind of don't talk about this enough, but there's a significant amount of technical debt when it comes to application security out there. A lot of folks will build and deploy applications. They kind of tell themselves they'll get to some sort of vulnerability that they know about eventually. A lot of times they don't know about them and they don't even know they exist and nothing gets done at all. So, as they used to say back in the vernacular, are we cruising for a bruising here and are things going to get worse?
It's funny. I was talking about this repeatedly for the past month or so. Yeah, things are going to get worse. We have, I think, a bumpy time ahead, especially with some of the economic pressures, and companies that aren't as mature with their AppSec may view security as a cost center. So I think that not only is just our general maturity in the application security discipline a little bit insufficient right now, I think in the next year or so, we're going to have a lot of cost pressures that are really going to force people to prioritize what they're spending money on.
So what is the fundamental problem? I mean, I don't think people get out of bed in the morning and go, oh, wow, let's go build an insecure application. So where does everything kind of break down?
So I think there's two big avenues for that. The first is just increasing complexity. Our applications are becoming more and more complex. So fundamentally, especially with the rise of things like cloud native, you end up really stitching together an application. It's a dynamic configuration of a bunch of services and containers and deployments all running together. I'd liken it to, instead of building a car, putting together a bill of materials, putting them all together, and then driving it down the road. Nowadays, the car's parts are changing as you're driving them. And that just creates this huge complexity problem. It's hard to even keep track of all the pieces, never mind the security of all the pieces. And then the other avenue is, frankly, it's still a relatively, let's say, to compare it to quality, a relatively immature discipline that hasn't been fully automated, hasn't been scaled in the same way that other kinds of application risk have been.
As we go along, does the relationship between the security teams and the developers need to change, or is it changing? Or, are these two cultures that are just never going to come together? And do we have to just throw everybody in a room and lock the door and see what happens?
So I think there's been traditionally a little bit of a, handover, throw it over the wall, it gets thrown back. I think that's changing. And I think it's changing for a few different reasons, but two of the big ones. One, cybersecurity professionals are becoming thin on the ground. There's not enough of us. And so developers are having to take on some of that responsibility. And so it's getting democratized a little bit, just due to scarcity of professionals who can focus. And then the other reason is, I think everybody hates that throw it over the wall, throw it back. It's kind of a lose-lose for everyone. And just to be very blunt about it, it can turn into a lot of finger pointing or they're slowing me down. So both sides are actually coming together. I do think long-term, it'll start collapsing into each other and the roles will become a little bit more. Cybersecurity provides guidance and education and stops being a blocker as the developers pick up the security burden themselves. And so security becomes an enabler, not a blocker.
Truth be told, a lot of developers, use that excuse about productivity as a reason not to be so good at security, right? They're basically saying, this is somebody else's problem and I got to write all this code quick and I got to meet all these deadlines. So the question is can we build applications at the rate that we are on, maybe even faster, and build them securely?
It's funny because developers are, after all, a kind of engineer, and there's that old engineering maxim, do you want it fast, cheap, or good? Pick two. And the fact of the matter is that's not sufficient anymore. I think they tend to view it that way, right? Oh, look, I can do it really, I can spend a ton of money and do it quickly, but I'm going to sacrifice good quality and security. I think slowly everybody is realizing that the definition of good software includes secure software. It's right up there with, does it do what I mean it to? Does it function? And the excuse of it slows me down it's not a good excuse anymore. It stopped being a good excuse a little bit ago. In the same way that I can't say, oh, you want the software to work? That's going to slow me down. It just doesn't track. Definition of work includes being secure.
Developers would also sort of expect that a lot of these issues are going to be handled by the platforms and the CI/CD pipelines, and all this stuff is going to get automated, and it should just fix the code when it's a low-level trivial thing. So, how automated are we getting to the point where maybe we don't have to trouble these developers with this, pesky little security issue?
Yeah, I wish it worked that way because, no, I mean, look, even as a tool vendor myself, I will tell you, tools can't solve everything right now. It's too hard of a problem set. You can't automate away all the security. You can't basically hit an easy button and then everything you deploy is secure. It is a discipline and it has to be checked. That said, there is a lot going on the platform side. When I deploy into Google Cloud or AWS or Microsoft Azure, there's a lot of security features that are present there. And it does create this odd handoff of what's my problem as a developer versus the problem I'm contracting out as part of my cloud services, at least for modern applications. But no, there's no easy button still. The fact of the matter is the main things that we can automate right now, with some few exceptions, is the detection of issues, SAST findings, SCA findings, misconfigurations. And only recently have we been able to automate things like prioritization of those issues and remediations. And as somebody on the cutting edge of auto remediation, I can tell you it's not a cure-all yet. We're probably a good 5 years, 10 years away from that.
So you don't think AI is going to come along and save us all from ourselves anytime soon?
No. Kind of in general, period, but also specifically in the AppSec space. Computers are very good, and AI is very, very good at handling big data quickly and deriving insights from it. But the fact of the matter is security is not quite just that deterministic. Like every other form of risk management, it requires judgment calls and what you find as acceptable risks. And fundamentally, the main people we're protecting against are other humans, not computers.
Do you think we need to retrain all the developers? And I ask the question because, if you're in college and you're studying to become a developer or wherever else you're going, security is an elective. It's not a requirement. And, anything that's an elective is pretty much not taken by people who are in a hurry to go to work. So, maybe is the fundamental flaw here is that we just allowed security to become an elective for all these folks.
Yeah, it's funny. I think the biggest problem, and I touched on it briefly, is code quality isn't an elective. It's part of how you're taught to code. Your code needs to work. Your code also needs to be secure. It needs to be part of the basic education of all developers. And I think a lot of companies are beginning to do that. Schooling systems and how we train developers prior to actually working in enterprises is not. And smaller, medium-sized businesses, they're just doing the best they can without much of a focus on it. But at least the big enterprises are doing a lot of on-the-job type training. And that's why I think the role of a cybersecurity professional in those organizations is really turning into things like education. But boy, it would be nice if everybody was as educated on secure code as they are on writing quality code coming out of school.
Well, speaking of that, we have all these wonderful DevSecOps processes that people are trying to build. There is a sermon is given, everybody nods their head in agreement, and then they go off and do whatever it is they normally do. And I guess the question I'm trying to drive at a little bit is, do we need to find a way to kind of make that stick in a way that is a cultural change? And what does it take to do that besides standing up in front of everybody and say, thou shalt?
So I think it actually goes back to an earlier question you asked, which is, are things going to get worse or better, or where are we going? I think we're probably still a couple of shocks to the system, big breaches, big violations, cyber warfare, something that sort of wakes everybody up a little bit. But I actually see this happening already on the enterprises, the really big ones. They know that it's just a matter of time before there's a shock to the system, and they're doing the best they can to prepare by creating decent practices and doing education. But the fact of the matter is, until it becomes very apparent to people the monetary and other kinds of risk that they're taking on by not having it being fully secure, I think that, frankly, it's going to continue along the way it is for a little bit. We're probably a shock or two away. That said, there's a lot of people obviously advocating, standing up and saying thou shalt. Just my experience is thou shalt works a lot better when it's thou shalt because look at this problem over here that just happened. We don't want it to happen to us.
All right. We have seen those so-called wake-up calls many times in the past already. And each time they occur, everybody stands up and says, yep, this time for sure it's the wake-up call. And then about 2 weeks later, everybody rolls over and hits the snooze button again. So,
the Colonial Pipeline, for example.
Yeah, so I'm not sure these shocks to the system are working in the way that we had hoped or intended. So I don't know. Is there some other way to think about it?
I do think they're having some results. Like a lot of the work like CISA is doing right now. Some of that was driven by the Colonial Pipeline, of course, but a lot of it was in the works before. The executive order on SBOMs for federal purchasing that went out, about a year ago now. I think there's some realization, especially on the federal level, that we need to get better. And I do think those are slowly driving us in that direction. I've heard the word SBOM more in the last 6 months than I had in the previous 5 years. I think this is steps in the right direction that are driven by shocks. But it is slow progress, I agree. It's a little frustrating, right? When you can see that nobody likes a Cassandra, screaming that the sky is falling. But, the fact of the matter is we underinvest in cybersecurity, both from execution and from training.
Most business executives, when they hear the phrase SBOM, probably think it's a new type of cocktail somewhere. So the question I would ask you is...
You make me want to go make that now, just figure out what's in it.
Exactly. And so the question then becomes, what do we got to do to get the business side to kind of drive this harder? Because that's the thing that the developer side will ultimately respond to.
So, as one of those business side people, sometimes myself, I will tell you we're driven by a couple of things. One is requirements, standards, certifications. And I think a lot of those are going in that direction. But we're already there to some degree in the highly regulated industries like medical. But that is slowly spreading out to generalized application development. And same thing too, requirements for the ecosystems you play in, right? Mobile applications actually have some reasonable security standards because if you want to be in the store for Apple, you have to have certain amounts of security. But the other part is customer demand. And that's the part that I see really ramping up right now. We all sell our applications to somebody for the most part. whether it's another business or sometimes consumers. And the other stakeholders are beginning to demand security in, frankly, the same way that the demand software works. SolarWinds, whatever we can say about the lessons learned from that, I think one of the big lessons was, hey, you're dependent on your vendors for the applications that they provide being secure, and there needs to be a minimum level of things like contractual agreements there. So I think there is a lot of business push towards this, because look, the two people I listen to the most on the business side are the compliance and regulations that I have to comply with, and the people giving me money. And so as they demand more security and more transparent security, of course, the business side is going to listen. But I do think that's going to be a journey we take over the next 3 to 5 years. It's not going to be tomorrow.
Do you think we become our own worst enemy because we embraced agile programming and then we told ourselves that, anytime there's an issue, we'll rapidly fix it, but we never do. And so then the problem becomes this, continuous life cycle of issues where vulnerabilities never get addressed. And this is becoming part of the problem. So maybe, we need to tell ourselves that, we can't just experiment on the end users anymore.
It's funny because it goes back to another question you had earlier, which was, are we kind of making things worse? Especially like if you think about agile, as I pointed out, the complexity problem is getting worse. So if you were going to try to make complexity a bigger issue, you would change things every single day or multiple times a day. Agile development introduces complexity. Complexity introduces risk. It's just sort of fundamental to how we've decided to approach application development. Rapid development, lots of changes, break it fast, fix it fast. The problem is, I don't care what you're investing in cybersecurity, if everything keeps changing every day or multiple times a day, you end up creating a problem that you can never catch up to. And I do think, some of the more critical pieces of applications, it's critical infrastructure, for example, they've begun slowing things down a little bit because security is just too important to risk just to increase the speed of feature delivery. In general, I bet that pendulum swings back a little bit towards slower, more careful releases until such a time as we can get the automation to the level to support it for real.
All right, folks, you heard it here. Unless everybody opens up their windows and starts screaming, I'm not going to take it anymore tomorrow, we're going to have some serious issues coming forward. So hold on to your hat. Jeffrey, thanks for being on the show.
Thank you. Boy, I feel so negative. There's a lot of good stuff. but yeah.
All right, back to you guys in the studio.
This is Digital Anarchist.
Alrighty, we're back here live at KubeCon, Cloud Native Con in beautiful Valencia, Spain. Day 2, we're in hall number 1. And you know what? I guess it's getting near lunchtime because I see a lot of people
Down there by the lunch table is a lot of traffic. It's great to see live people, like so many people. I haven't seen so many people in a couple of years now. So
I know, right?
It's very, very good there. I see Liz Rice down by the Isovalent booth. It's a lot of good people around. I have two good people with me. Let me introduce you to them. To my far right is my friend Aaron Reinhardt. If you've watched Techstrong TV or followed our coverage, Aaron's no stranger. He's been at our DevSecOps events in RSA, which is 2 weeks from now. He's been a frequent guest. Aaron, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Aaron, of course, is one of the co-founders of Verica, along with Casey, and we have a lot of friends at Verica, right? Oh, it's good to have you. Welcome to KubeCon. Welcome to Techstrong TV today, Aaron.
Yeah, thanks for having us. It's great to be here. Like you said, it's actually hard to believe RSA is only 2 weeks away.
Yeah, it's 2 weeks away. Well, it's June. I would have thought RSA was a few months ago.
Well,
yeah. It's better than nothing. I'm glad we're having it. I'm looking forward to it.
I'm glad to be here in Valencia. Glad here to be at KubeCon.
I got to tell you, I'd rather be in Valencia than San Francisco.
Yeah, me
That's
too.
a whole nother story.
Me too. It's
Anyway,
great.
joining Aaron and I had you on Techstrong TV via Zoom. But it's the first time we've met.
Casey.
Yep, first time we've met in person. Tony De La Fuente. Tony is the creator, founder of Prowler.
Yep, exactly. The founder of Prowler Open Source.
Founder's good word.
And I lead the Prowler Pro in Verica. The Prowler.
Okay.
Yep.
Well, we're going to get into that in a second. You already gave out the whole interview, man.
That wasn't a spoiler.
But you know what? For audiences familiar with Aaron, Tony, besides being the founder of Prowler, give people a little bit of background on you.
Well, yeah, I started with Prowler like 6 years ago, but before that I've been around cybersecurity and open source type of projects in the last 15, 20 years. I've done things for networking, Wi-Fi networks, and also now in the last 10 years more focus on the cloud. Mostly in the AWS cloud, but also doing forensics and other stuff for all other clouds.
Well, 7 years ago, it was mostly just AWS cloud, right?
Yeah, mostly on the
You didn't
AWS.
see a lot of Google and Microsoft was just coming through.
Yeah, mostly for AWS, but I prepared a training for cloud forensics a few years ago, and I did GCP and Azure as well.
Excellent. And look, for people in our audience maybe who are not familiar with Prowler or not 100%, Prowler is, of course, one of the most popular open source projects on AWS and the cloud for security. Aaron, if you don't mind, before we jump into Verica,
Sure.
I want to go a little deeper on Prowler.
Yeah.
Tony, what does Prowler do for people? Why do people use it?
Yeah, so Prowler is a security scanner that goes through your AWS infrastructure and tells you what you have right or wrong. Basically, so I wanted to do something really easy for anybody to run it and get direct insights. So anybody, even if you are not a cybersecurity expert, you can run it and get red if you have to fix it, or green if you are good to go. That's all. And with that, we added more and more checks covering the most important AWS services and also many different formats, which makes Prowler very easy to integrate with other solutions. And of course, with AWS Security Hub, for example.
Absolutely.
Alan, what I love about Tony's Prowler is Tony's story behind it. Is that when we originally told me about how Prowler came to be, it was partly it's a common problem in all enterprise where there's one security for every 100 devs for 10 ops, right? Like Tony was you were what
Actually,
only
when I was in
in
Alfresco back in 2014, I think I took over a position of the cloud security guy. I said, wow, now
the guy.
Now what? And by that time, I think it was 2014, the CIS released the AWS benchmark with a license that we could take it and write whatever we want on top of it. I mean, or taking the benchmark as a baseline for the 50-something number of checks that they published. So I wrote Prowler based on that. So I said, well, at least I have level 1 and level 2 of security based on the CIS. And now Prowler is way more than the CIS, so we support many other security frameworks, but that was very, very helpful and helped me to say, all the engineers and other people working in AWS say, hey, I don't want to be on top of you. So babysitting, you know what you do in the cloud. So run Prowler by yourself and see what is wrong and fix it. That's
why people, it's a common problem, common pain people have is like, I got all this cloud, all these teams, all these apps to support in this AWS, and it's a lot of work to do all that. Tony started automating in a way through Prowler. He started automating it through code, and over time, it turns out everyone else had the same problem. That's why Prowler just grew by leaps and bounds.
Yeah,
I think it's a great story.
Yeah, we had like 36 accounts and around 100 engineers. Of course, I didn't want to be on top of them, so they could do that by themselves. And I decided to make it open source. So in terms of weeks or months, it started being more and more popular, and now is one of the most popular tools for AWS.
I think one of the reasons for that, for success, is something that, even a blind squirrel gets a nut every now and then, right?
Yeah.
I sit here and I talk to people every day. A common theme that I hear at Kubernetes with Kubernetes tools, especially security tools, but also configuration, data management, etc., is, look, if you're a small team, you got 3 to 5 engineers, probably one of them is the kube expert, whatever, or the cloud expert. He does 90% of it. The other people help out. They do some other stuff. You don't need a Prowler, perhaps, right? You got one thing and you're on it. And even if you do need Prowler, it's an easy thing to do, right?
Yeah, that is
because you only got the one thing to do. I scan it, I'm done. Now, once I start scaling, like you said, you had, was it 36 engineers or something?
By that time, no, 36 AWS accounts and about 100 engineers.
But now, it's very hard to get your hands around this.
Yeah.
Right? Now you got problems. Now you got scale issues.
Yep.
And it's when that, especially with open source, that is when scale leads to even just a pure open source product isn't enough, because the open source product is good from, let's say, 0 to 100. 100 to 1,000, I need a Prowler Pro or something like that, right?
Exactly.
Nail on the head,
exactly.
Sure.
That was what we thought. So considering the number of users that we have with Prowler, we said, how can we improve the experience other than, of course, improving the open source tool that we are doing every day? Actually, since we are working in Verica, we have released 3 new versions and more than 100 new features.
That's
so
big.
thanks to be full-time, we are now 4 full-time engineers working for that.
So that that's helps. That always helps.
So, and considering that also that Prowler is important piece, is the core of Prowler Pro. So we are growing Prowler, and now we have a product called Prowler Pro that brings UI and infrastructure with support from our side to the customers, and many other features that we consider are very helpful for companies. In addition, exactly, to scan multiple accounts in parallel. Something that is very important to highlight with Prowler, and you said that more or less before, is about visibility. So the main issue in the cloud, any cloud, is visibility. So, and sometimes we have tools, or we see services that they go, okay, you have to configure it to go and scan whatever you want. The point is, the security is not wherever you want. The security is where it is, or an incident is where it is. So you have to make sure that you are covering the 360 degrees of the whatever you have. So Prowler and Prowler Pro goes through all your regions, all your accounts, no matter what you say. You don't have to configure anything.
But all the time, though, too, right?
All the time.
Well, it's continuous, because you have to in today's world. Things are changing, not even day by day, they're changing hour by hour, minute by minute.
Exactly. So in the last 10 years, I've done hundreds, if not thousands, of security assessments. And always, 100% of the times, I found resources in places that the customers didn't know. So this is something that we want to to fix with Prowler. And with Prowler Pro, of course, with continuous monitoring.
Yeah.
So the customer needs to know what they have, where it is. So, okay, suddenly I found an EC2 instance in Singapore. Oh, wow, what a surprise.
Right.
So we want to fix that.
And one of the really powerful things I love about Prowler Pro is the theme. It also exists in Prowler too. Is the simplicity of it, right? In Prowler Pro, the UI is really red and green.
Yeah.
It's very
Always.
it's in your face, and but it's constantly changing. It'll tell you what's good, what's bad. It sometimes, because there's so much going on, we're at such a scale now, and it's just I need to know what I need to do, what I need to do it. Does that make sense? I don't want to go look through 10 different screens. I don't want to,
I get it. So let's talk. So Prowler Pro was it was announced already, or at the because I remember talking to you about it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's when the last time we spoke. What about here at the show? Any new announcements or anything?
Well, we are talking and showing Prowler Pro.
Okay, so you're here showing it to people,
Pro, so
but not just here, right? This is going to be rolled out. You're going to be at some other events.
We're going to be in many different events, like the week of the Black Hat and DEF CON in Vegas.
In Las Vegas, in August,
around
security summer camp.
Yeah, that's right. And also it's B-Sides Las Vegas the same week.
Well, it's the same. That's security summer camp. B-Sides, DEF CON,
and Black Hat.
RSA in 2 weeks.
Yeah. We are going to be there around also if somebody wants to catch up and see the details of Prowler Pro.
We'll be there too.
To see there. The week of the AWS Rainforce, that there is another event called Forward Cloud Sec.
Right.
It's like a community-driven event the day before the AWS Rainforce in Boston.
Okay.
We're going to be around as well.
Beautiful.
So, yeah.
Aaron, I wanted to talk Verica for just a little whatever time we have left.
Sure.
I mean, Prowler is, look, it's a force, right?
Yeah.
It's something, but there's more going on at Verica as well. Why don't you give us a quick update?
Yeah, so for the folks that aren't familiar with Verica, so we are the creators of Chaos Engineering. It started at our time at Netflix. My co-founder, Casey, was at Netflix, created Chaos Engineering, wrote the O'Reilly book on it. I am known as being sort of the creator of security-based chaos engineering. But with Verica, what we wanted to do was, so chaos engineering is a part of what we do, but we've evolved the craft to be just something we call continuous verification. It's the idea of constantly, proactively verifying that the system can do what it's supposed to do. And that may sound like a very simple concept, but like with the scale, speed, and complexity of modern computing, what's happening is we're building and delivering things so fast, but we don't know whether we're on solid ground or on the edge of a cliff, right? Well, Verica is designed to do, so we use things like chaos engineering, we use things like continuous audit and assessment for security, we have some kind of observability kind of capabilities in a product, but we're trying to proactively ensure, can you meet your SLOs? Does your security posture actually, is it what you think it is? Give you that confidence that proactively that instead of trying to figure out the problem after the fact. That's really what Verica's doing.
Absolutely.
And Prowler's part of our story, moving into the AWS space, and Prowler's just a great story by itself. And Tony's
You know what we didn't mention though? For people who want to get information on Prowler and Prowler Pro, do they go to the Verica site? Is there a Prowler site?
They can go to prowler.pro.
.pro.
That is the easier way, probably, or at my Twitter handle, Tony BLYX, or I think
Prowler.pro. You don't want people bothering you on Twitter.
It's fine.
And for Verica, it's Verica.com. Verica.
Verica.io.
I'm sorry, Verica.io. Hey guys, thanks for stopping by. Tony, it's a pleasure to meet you in person, man.
Good to meet you too.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Welcome.
So good to see you, Alan.
Good to see you. I'll see you in RSA in a couple weeks.
Will. Yep.
You can be there.
I'll be there.
We will see you there. We'll be on Broadcast Alley all week,
man. Perfect.
All right. Be well. We're out.
Thank you.
I think we're gonna take a lunch break. Or maybe we have one more coming up. Stay tuned. Give us a minute.
This is Techstrong TV.
Hey everyone, we're back here live streaming from Moscone West for the RSA conference. We're on what they call Broadcast Alley. You know, there's 20-some thousand people here this year at RSA, and there's no end to the amount of sessions and keynotes and workshops and training and party, God knows parties. But let me tell you what really is, for me, special about RSA, and that's the people. You know, we were here in 2020 at the end of, right at the beginning of COVID. Mm-hmm. We didn't even really understand, but people were getting sick. And then, of course, last year it was virtual only, and this year it's been postponed, but we're here now. And you forget the people-to-people connection of people you've met and know and friendships you've struck over the years in the industry. Mm-hmm. And so for me, coming here this year and seeing friends I haven't seen in 2 years and understanding, you know what? Just because we weren't in suspended animation with COVID.
No, we were just stuck in.
We were stuck in
the unlimited
houses,
Zoom loop.
Right, and Zoom. But life goes on, and things go on, and you know, our families and our lives and life stories go on. Some folks we won't see again, unfortunately. But this guy right here is a friend, and I was happy to see him. May or may not recognize him because this is the first time I've ever seen him not in a vendor shirt.
Yeah,
he's wearing like a real shirt.
I'm like a civilian again.
You look like
I lost 100 pounds since I saw you last, and I'm wearing civilian
clothes.
clothes.
Have enough shirts that say?
No, actually, today was my day to go meet with people on the show floor. So I went incognito, which is why I'm like dressed like this. It's been a good event.
Absolutely. So. If you don't recognize, this is my friend Brian Reed. Brian, of course, is one of the driving forces, creative forces behind Now Secure.
Yeah.
And most of you may know Now Secure, but if you don't, Brian, give them a quick.
Sure. So Now Secure is a mobile application security company. We do. We have a full suite of security testing tools, training, pen testing services that people use, but we're mobile first and mobile only. So we were born when iOS and Android was born as a mobile forensics business. So we've been doing this for 13, 14 years. So if you think about age as a high growth startup, and you and I were talking about I think the last interview I had was with you 2 years ago at RSA.
Yeah.
And so it's great to be back again and see
it really
people
is
and the old
good.
friends.
It's good to see you. And, you know, we losing 100 pounds is a great thing. Sometimes we lose it in ways we don't want to, but that's okay. It's still good to lose.
COVID treated me not well.
Yeah, so. COVID's a tough one.
It's all good, though.
Yep, I'm glad you're here and well. You know, things are growing, though, and they continue to grow. And for you and the company, a crucial partnership with GitHub is really kind of shaping or reshaping.
Driving the business substantially. You know, when we think about working together with DevOps.com, which is a great resource built up over the years, we moved from sort of security testing for security people and tools into security testing built into pipelines. So if you're building a mobile app, whether it's iOS or Android, we can automatically test that. And over the years, as we've been building our business, we've been working more and more with development companies, development tools, and developers. And late last year, we entered a partnership with GitHub, where we're within the GitHub Advanced Security environment, we're the only dynamic automated security testing platform that plugs in as a GitHub action into the repo. So for a developer now, on any push, on any pull, on any line of code they write, they get mobile app security scanning. Most of the world is focused on web and serverless and cloud. Well, we bring the mobile piece into that world, and that's been just growing like a rocket, right? So
absolutely
enabling developers to write the code securely in the first place, scan it in the repo, check it on the pull request. All of that now is reducing friction and driving a lot more secure apps in the App Store.
So, Brian, those 13 years, you and I know each other probably 4 or 5 years now, maybe more. And you mentioned when, DevOps.com and over the years and what we've seen. Well, I'll tell you, the mission has changed a little bit for you. Not for you personally, but for
the company.
For the company. And not just for your company, but the whole the whole mobile app world, right? Where, there was a time, I remember when I first did DevOps.com, mobile app development was a thing. It was a thing unto itself. Right? As you mentioned, there was Android and there was iOS, but it was clearly separate and apart from let's call it non-mobile.
Yeah, well, mainstream web.
Mainstream web.
Right.
Then we saw sort of the primacy of the mobile app. Like a lot of people who said, look, why do I need something that works on people's mobile devices, and just a mobile-friendly website doesn't cut it.
Right.
I need the mobile app. And we saw sort of the primacy or the golden age of this. And that fundamentally changed the way developers develop. They didn't develop mainstream app first and then port it to the mobile. A lot of stuff started being developed
mobile first.
And now that creates a different set of security and governance and compliance challenges.
Absolutely.
Than if you did it, it was kind of backwards a little.
Build web, then build mobile.
Right.
Yeah.
And and you guys had to kind of adapt to that and
go through the cycle.
I think
it's been very interesting to watch what's happened. So, when I first got started with Now Secure many moons ago, mobile was often hanging off the side of IT. It was hanging off the side of development. It might have been hanging off the side of security. And oftentimes there were these fast-moving teams. What's interesting in a lot of big enterprise companies is the mobile team is actually the first DevOps team because the rapid innovation cycle is necessarily on mobile. If you think about like a web browser, how often does HTML, CSS evolve as a spec? How often does Java get updated? OS is on mobile devices. Every year
day.
there's a big new push.
Right. Well,
and there's patches all the time. But, iOS 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 15. Right? Now we're on 15, right? So almost every year there's an OS update, which creates new features, new devices. And so that refresh cycle is a lot faster. And so what we've seen now is that most organizations have a mobile presence in some way, shape, or form, whether it's mobile responsive or mobile native. Many of the companies we talk to, mobile is the spearhead for the customer. Customer has a mobile app in their hand, right? If you look at Starbucks has more money they're doing through a phone transaction than almost any other company. Right? Some 20, 30% of all Starbucks revenue is sourced on a mobile device. And so even the traditional brick and mortars now recognize that mobile is the best way to interface with the customer. Absolutely. But you have to protect the customer. And I'll give you an example. In the news on Monday this week, Tim Hortons, for you Canadian lovers. So I'm an old BlackBerry guy. So I have a soft spot for Tim Hortons in Canada. Tim Hortons got slapped and fined by the Canadian government because their mobile app was harvesting data on their users and continuously monitoring their whereabouts.
I read this story, actually, yes.
Train wreck, right?
Absolutely.
So that's where security and privacy overlap. They were violating privacy rules and they had security vulnerabilities wrapped in it and they got slapped by the government. And so Tim Hortons was trying to use mobile to better serve their customers, but they made serious mistakes in how developers implemented what they did. And so now they got slapped. And we've seen that over and over again over the years, is trying to find the right way to fast innovate on mobile, build security in as you go, right? And have great outcomes. And like working with GitHub has been fantastic because now as the developers are writing the code, they're making sure it's secure in the repo that they're already working.
Well, that's almost that whole GitOps thing, right?
Yeah.
Where in some ways it's moving left, right? Where look, if I could get to that code while it's still in the repo, as we're putting it into that CI/CD pipeline, and get to it there, fix it there, test it, fix it there. It's a hell of a lot easier than doing it afterwards.
In prod. Yeah, I mean, you can imagine the fire drill going on at Tim Hortons right now.
Well, you betcha.
App, right? But
I would think
you look at the economic studies. So we've helped customers move from semi-annual releases, 3-month releases, to 2-week releases, to 1-week releases, and drive innovations. You've seen, like with COVID, everybody was stuck at home. So you saw the rise of the food delivery apps. And a lot of organizations that were brick and mortars that had to turn into mobile retailers.
Yep.
Right? So all of those things are impacting where the drive is. And what's great about it now is the technology between automation and integrations are there to enable a much more mature security built-in, security first kind of approach.
Security first?
Mobile first, security first. Yeah. Interesting way to think about it.
That is.
Yeah.
As a security guy, I'm honored.
Yeah, well, that doesn't mean everybody thinks that way. I mean, if you're in a regulated market,
but hey, man,
if you're in a regulated market, you're going to think that way. But right. what's happening, and what's really interesting about some of our largest customers and our fastest moving customers, they both have one thing in common, which is security can't be the department to know. Security needs to become an enabler for the developer to get their work done. And that's what you want to call it, shift left or whatever the language you want to use. How does security and privacy now enable development to get their work done so they can meet the business needs and not step on a landmine like Tim Hortons did.
Absolutely.
So,
hey, Brian, let me ask you another question, though. Do you think we see a time when sort of we see the line blur between calling it mobile development versus calling it
development?
Yeah.
For a number of our customers, they're now mobile first, which is interesting. To a large extent, actually, the backend's always the same. So you have the whole world of APIs, API security, backend infrastructure, cloud, and then you're hanging mobile and web off the front. The interesting thing about it is a lot of this is really what's the user experience and what's omni-channel mean in terms of the transparent experience on a device, a laptop, a browser, a kiosk, kind of wherever you go. What is interesting is where the operating systems are going. So, for example, if you have a TV at home, it's probably running Android. All those little apps on your TV, that's Android. And so you're kind of seeing this expansion with IoT of mobile-centric application-oriented scenarios on devices like your car dashboard with like CarPlay and Google Play in the dashboard on the TVs and everything else. And so you see Apple and Google, the Android team at Google, they're both enabling more kinds of experiences.
And we're seeing that. I mean, I don't want to get my new cars. We have 2 new cars at home because we lease. It's not that I go out and just
hey, leasing is your friend. I've leased for years until my last car.
But they, both of them have both Android Play or whatever and Apple Play in it, and it amazes me how it's far superior to the phone. In some things, but there's really a lot of great integrations.
There can be, you got all the sensors in the TV, in the car, and the phone, right, and other devices like whether you're wearing an AirPod, and phone apps can take advantage of AirPod, and
it's also all gesture driven,
gesture and behavior driven. The old cars with the dial, you still reach in. Sometimes you're looking for the dial that you can turn up the fan.
So we have the. I'll tell you offline.
I'm with you. I got one of those cars.
Pretty cool, yeah.
So, but if I can around what Apple and Google are doing, one really big thing that is impacting all of us is that Apple and Google are both working on security and privacy more than they ever have before.
Absolutely.
So this is where we're going to deviate from the web world.
Yeah.
Right. So we've seen Apple go full bore on privacy. Right.
Yes, they have. They're making that a difference maker.
They are, and so developers have had to adapt to that. In many instances, security teams are responsible for privacy.
But that was always, in my mind, anyway. That was always one of the allure of mobile, is that it's done right. It could be more secure than.
Yeah, the architecture of mobile is more secure than a PC, a laptop, or some of the other devices. The thing about mobile application security is you can write a good app and a bad app. I can do that for web. I can do that for mobile. I can do it for anything else. The nice thing about this device is it's harder for an attacker to do something to the device because of the nature of sandboxing and the way Apple designed it. The challenge, though, is this device is harvesting in the app a lot of data about me, and it's transmitted over the air. So can I intercept it on the carrier,
I'm going to tell you
Wi-Fi, or
I was on an international carrier going to Europe a couple of weeks ago, and they gave you free Wi-Fi up to a gig. I said, a gigabit, that'll last me no problem.
1 hour later.
An hour later, I had transmitted again. It's not like I was watching movies.
No, it happens.
It was just it's
all the apps running in the background. It's how Apple and Google sync with their cloud. But in the land of how this is all evolving, there's something really interesting that Android's got going on, and Apple with privacy to agree, is this whole idea of safety labeling.
Yeah.
Right. And so when we look at like recent White House cybersecurity orders after all the security breaches and supply chain, safety labeling is coming. And actually, Android is leading the pack on all these technology platforms, web, mobile, cloud, or everything else. And so Google,
good to know.
Yeah, I mean, for those who are Android developers, listening along today, if you haven't noticed, go look at the safety labeling program that's going on at Google. So what they're doing is through the App Defense Alliance, they brought this notion of safety labeling. And so it's basically now Google developers will
almost
attest
like
to the security and privacy like supply chain.
Now this is coming though. It's not here.
So phase 1 is public. So Google's published on their blog, and they're now making it possible for Android developers when they submit the app to list what level of safety and privacy their app does as part of it. And that program is now just getting started. There's a few hundred developers who've already started the work, and it's going to grow this
It'll
summer.
blossom.
And what's really cool about it is, so if I'm a developer, let's say I'm making an app, I don't know, it could be a financial app like a bank, it could be a gaming app, whatever that is. What's great about safety labels is if I have a safety label, then I can show my customers they can trust me. So now I have a feature that I can use to show why I'm better than the other guy. So I can imagine where the banks will be playing the one-upsmanship game of all of them wanting to have safety labels so you use their banking app. And you can imagine the same thing with retailers and e-tailers.
And you can't blame them, though, because security has become a difference maker. It's been shown that and I think Apple's the poster child for this now. If you are going to lead with security and privacy, people like that. They take notice of it.
They are more and more, I think. And you know, there's been the various things that have happened in the world over the last 5 years that have driven this whole privacy initiative. You have GDPR in Europe, CCPA in California. There's privacy laws or regs coming in many of the states, you know, across the US and other countries. Clear that Canadian Tim Hortons paying attention to it as well. So security and privacy are like this Venn diagram of overlap. And it's really kind of exciting to see Google kind of leading the way with, hey, we're going to bring this to Android. And because we do believe it's important that people should be able to trust their apps. I got to imagine
Apple won't be far behind.
Well, they've got privacy attestation in there too. So they were first with privacy, and Google will be first. Android will be first with safety labels.
Right.
And each of them are kind of moving us forward to realize that this is the number one device for most humans on the planet. And this thing is safe and secure. Right? And people depend on the app experiences that they have on it.
People want to get more information on the company, where do they go?
Yeah, come to nowsecure.com, nowsecure.com.
Brian, it truly is a pleasure to see you.
Good to see you again, especially after 2 years away. It's good to do this.
Absolutely. I hope to see you again soon.
Absolutely.
Let's not wait till next RSA, which is next April 24th and 27th. The banner's right there.
Look at that. It's date already.
But there's other places, maybe Black Hat or something.
We will probably cross paths at Black Hat. You can definitely find us there, and we'll be in the Hacker Village too.
Very cool, man. Brian Reed here on, what are we on? Techstrong TV.
Techstrong TV. There you go. Right there on the board behind us. Thanks for having me.
Also on the board. Yes. We're going to take a break. We're at RSA. We're wrapping up our day 3 coverage. We'll be back in a minute. Bye-bye.
Coding is changing the world, making a difference in the world.
We take anyone, any adult, and help them become the best version of themselves and become a software engineer.
At Techstrong Group, we've undertaken to meet this challenge with our Engineering the Change Scholarship.
My career has completely changed to now being sought after by some of the biggest tech companies in the world.
Full $10,000 scholarship to one winner to attend the intense software development course at Boca Code.
I was just ready to be a software engineer.
So, Donald is another story.
Right now it's kind of like, I don't know.
Honestly, starting to scare me a little bit.
Roller coaster of understanding something one moment and then feeling lost the next.
If you change the capitalization of a file name, you are going to your whole project.
At the end of it, you're going to be a really good family.
We call Stephanie like the silent ninja.
As much as he's struggling, Donald really, really wants this.
My house burned down twice.
The biggest thing I'm struggling with definitely is time.
It's pretty cool that I've been able to expand my mind to be able to accept different ways of doing something.
My only option is to succeed.
Boca Code, we do it!
High is definitely getting started. Lows would be Darius jokes.
We told all of them that this is the hardest thing they would have to go through.
All of our graduates are absolute stars.
Boca Code!
Who will graduate and become a software engineer?
Hi again, everyone. I hope you all enjoyed today's episode of Techstrong TV. Our host brought us some amazing interviews with industry experts from around the world. From our interviews at RSA and KubeCon Cloud Native Con to a double dose of View with Vizard, today's slate was full of amazing content. We'll be back again tomorrow, so please join us for that. Once again, thanks for watching, and we hope to see you again soon. As always, stay strong, Techstrong.